interesting clip here. It's Joe Rogan and Will Storr. Will is a journalist, and he is talking about communism. And he's talking about the structure and how they wanted to flip the hierarchy. And the way that that is likened to what the woke mob has been doing in society for the past, 10 years, probably longer if you're really keeping your eyes open. But it's very similar. So we're going to be having a conversation about how the woke mob is very much like the communist regimes of the world. Very, very similar. And in that, after we listen to Joe Rogan and them talk, we're going to have a clip of the BLM leader speaking just to exemplify a point really quick, because I'm going to be jumping into a whole conversation about this stuff. Then we had Tucker and Brett Weinstein talking, because Brett Weinstein was the victim of some serious racism that was in the name of equality. It was a wild story. Then we got Larry Elder, who was also the victim of racism, in my opinion, being called the black face of white supremacy. Then we got Herschel Walker, who also got called the very same thing. And those two gentlemen have something very, very much in common that we're going to talk about. And then we end off with Jordan Peterson, and he's talking about don't let the woke mob form. How afraid are you of standing up to the lie and what it means to society when you participate in the lie? And in this conversation, the lie is, what the woke mob has been pushing, the series of lies that the woke mob has been pushing. So let's get into that. And also, I'm just going to interrupt the clip really quick because there's an ad. So I'm just going to interject really, really quick, just so you guys don't have to sit through that. Don't forget about IamCoachColin.com. Ironically, as I do that, we got Sold Not For Sale. We got Public Enemy #1, different versions of Sold Not For Sale. And the discount code is I Am Coach Colin, all capital letters, all one word, one L in the name Colin. Let's get into this first clip.
Like, mitigate some of the problems that come with it.
Yeah, and that's why I like talking about communism, because communism was the biggest experiment we've ever had in eradicating status. So Marx and Engels, their big idea was that status comes from private property, from private ownership. So you could have a house that's a perfectly functional house and you're happy with it, but then somebody builds a big palace next door, suddenly you feel shit. Right. So they said, communism could be summed up in one sentence, which is the abolition of private property. We get rid of that. We get rid of people being interested in status. Everybody works together. But it just didn't work. Like, there were some sociologists that went to the Soviet Union in the 50s, and they found 10 distinct social classes in the Soviet Union. All they did was they took the existing status game hierarchy with the wealthy at the top and the workers at the bottom, and they flipped it. So the workers were at the top and the wealthy and former wealthy really were at the bottom. And those former wealthy, the bourgeoisie, the children of the bourgeoisie, were absolutely discriminated against openly and horrifically. If you weren't tortured and killed, you were held back in every sense. And that's the thing about utopians. Utopians often talk about we're going to get rid of the hierarchy, but they don't want to get rid of the hierarchy. They just want a new hierarchy with you at the top every single time.
Yeah. That's what got Brett Weinstein in trouble when he was teaching at Evergreen University. Do you remember this story?
I do, yeah.
It was the same situation. Brett, they had I think it was like a day of appreciation for people of color, where people of color could stay home, they still get paid. And you go, wow, I wish Mike was here. He's very helpful, whatever it was. And they decided one year to switch it and make it so that white people can't come. You cannot come. And which is a very different sentiment. Then you can stay home if you like and you still get paid. But you can come.
Yeah.
But if you want to stay home, you just get paid. And everybody just chose to stay home. It's nice, right? And thank you for appreciating me. That's not a negative, right? If you have the money to do it and it doesn't fucking stop everything in its tracks,
of course,
sounds great.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Sounds like a nice liberal hippie thing to do. But the other one doesn't.
No.
The other one scares me because it's racist.
Yeah.
If you're saying white people can't be here, like, why not?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
What did I do?
Yeah.
I didn't do anything. Like, you're saying that white people shouldn't be allowed to be in a place where they work because you decide. Because you decide they have to stay home. Look, there's better ways of going about this.
It's terrible.
It's a bad idea.
Yeah.
It's the idea behind appreciating people is great, but the idea about discriminating people in any way.
So, what they're talking about right there, that is actually one of the clips that we're going to touch on with Brett Weinstein. I'm just going to flip through this ad really, really quick for you guys, but I just want to interject and say, towards that situation that happened with Brett Weinstein, I actually think that either way, it's a bad thing to do, because the best way to get past things like slavery and racism, the best way to work past that stuff, it's never to look at slavery and say, oh, that's something that doesn't matter anymore. Who cares about that? That's not what I'm saying. But the way to work past that is to not bring it up constantly. So when you have a day where you're like, hey, because you're black, you can stay home, that's bad. I don't think that's a good thing, you know, because of everything that's happened to you, because of how oppressed you are. Maybe I'm coming to work because I just want to kind of, you know, not think about that. Maybe when I come to work and there's white people and black people and Asian people and brown people and we're all together and we're working hard towards a goal, maybe that makes me feel really good. And then all of a sudden there's one day where they're like, hey, because you're black, you can stay home. No need to come in. We'll do all your work for you. For the day, you're singled out. The one thing that you don't want, you know, when you're talking about racism, like what hurts the most about racism? It's not the words. It's getting singled out just because of the color of your skin. And I would argue that's the exact same thing. And then when you go a step further and all of a sudden white people can't come, it's nonsense. And we're going to touch on it, how these are tactics that these communist woke types actually use. Let's get back to the clip.
That's bad.
But that also characterizes, I'm not saying that the kind of woke thing is the same as communism, but it has echoes of it. And it's the same flipping of the hierarchy. So when I was doing my research into communism, there was this phrase that came up. So the former bourgeoisie, wealthy business people and the children of them were called former people. It's a dismissive, you're a former people.
Wow.
And that's how, you know, when you think about how, especially, you know, men, especially white men, especially straight white men are treated at the moment.
Preach, brother.
They're former, you know, they're made to feel like former people. Like there's a whole generation of guys who are being raised in a culture where they're being made to feel, you've had your turn, sit down, shut up. The future is not for you. The future is for people who don't look like you and think
100%.
like you. And so that former people really resonated with me. It's like, you straight white men, you're former people. You're yesterday's people. You're not the future. You're not tomorrow.
I was watching an
shut
argument
up.
on Twitter where this man and this woman were going at it. And the man said something that was factually correct. Yeah. And the woman said, if you think that I'm going to take information from a straight white man... That was their comeback. That was their comeback. I'm not taking that information coming from a straight white man. Yeah. Like the last thing we need right now is straight white men speaking.
Well, I've had
Don't speak. Just listen. Yeah. It's time to listen. That's my favorite. Just please be quiet and listen. Like, hey, sometimes that's good advice. And sometimes you're just telling people you want to talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so ignorant. And I had a similar experience once. I used to teach a storytelling course at the Guardian newspaper, science of storytelling, and so it's like how to use psychology and neuroscience to make yourself a better storyteller. So I'm talking about studies and this study and that study. Yeah. And then during a break, this woman came up to me and she worked for a major academic, like one of the biggest academic journals, and she said to me, I've got a problem with what you've been talking about, and it's that most of these studies are by straight white men. And I was like, so okay, and what's the point? And she was saying, well, you can't really trust them because they've got their own, you know, they've got their
they're
own,
all evil.
Their perception of the world is wrong, and I felt actually a bit intimidated by that because I'm standing in the Guardian with this woman telling me that effectively I guess I've been racist somehow or sexist somehow. So I just said to her, I'm not going to have this conversation with you, okay? And she kind of went away. But I just thought, but it was the fact that she worked for a major scientific publication. She was telling me that because the work was done by straight white men, it could not be trusted. Like that's Mississippi level, like Mississippi 1932 level racism. It was absolutely a baffling kind of moment. And she was a smart person. She was clearly a smart person. But again, that's the human brain. It believes what it has to believe in order to make itself feel important and valued.
I've got an amazing example of that I just sent Jamie. I want you to see this. I want you to see this headline. Please make sure this headline is real first, because I have been duped before. But someone sent me this on the Instagram. And if it is true, praise the baby Jesus, because it's as good as the Babylon Bee. It's so good. It seems like satire. It's so good.
Oh, I think I know what it is.
Oh, please. Is it real?
Is it the teacher?
He's trying to no. He's trying to type with Carl. How's little buddy?
2017.
It's from 2017.
Yeah,
but it's real, right?
I mean, I'm seeing other people talk about it.
Okay, so just posted that. Let's see the article. Look at straight black men are the white people of black people. That's South Park level.
Yeah, it is.
That's South Park level.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
It feels counterintuitive to suggest that straight black men, as a whole, possess any sort of privilege. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
This is the great irony of these people.
It's amazing.
these kind of woke people talk about privilege. And there was a study that was done in the UK a few years ago. It was the More in Common report. It's the biggest ever psychological study of Britain's social psychology. Over 10,000 respondents, and they were looking at the kind of these belief sets, and they found there were 7 distinct belief groups in the country. One of those belief groups, they called them progressive activists, and these are people for whom the fight for social justice is at the heart of their identity. They believe that how you get on in life is about not about your talent and your hard work, but about your race and gender. So we know who they're talking about.
Yeah.
And so what was interesting about these people was, it just astonished me. First is that they are the richest of all the 7 groups. So they had more people earning over £50,000 per year as a family. And secondly, that they were the most highly educated of all the 7 groups. So these people that are constantly going on about privileged, if they're the most privileged people in Britain, they're amongst the most privileged people in the world. So that was the first thing. The second thing, which I thought was amazing, was that they were 6 times more likely to make political comments on what was then called Twitter. And they make more social media contributions than all of the rest of the groups combined.
Doesn't it make sense, though?
Completely, yeah.
They don't have any financial stress.
Yeah.
Right? They probably feel real guilty. And if they're white, they feel super guilty. And then they're young, and you get status from being progressive and an activist. And you don't have to be competitive in the workplace. You're out here throwing paint on the Michelangelos.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so and they also had the numbers. So in the UK, they make up 13% of the population. In the US, they make up 8% of the population. So on social media, because they dominate social media, they feel like sometimes the majority of the country, but their beliefs are actually really marginal. One of these, I think it was YouGov, asked people, who do you think should be the next governor of the Bank of England, a man or a woman? This is the kind of story that drives our media into paroxysms. Like if it's they've hired another white man, they get the shivers. This poll found that 5% of people thought it should be a woman, 3% of people thought it should be a man. Everybody else pretty much didn't give a shit.
That's great.
That's the reality.
That's good progress.
Yeah, most people think it doesn't matter.
That seems indicative of the general population that I come across.
Exactly. But because these people, these 13% or 8% in the US, are so highly educated and so wealthy, they dominate the media, they dominate the gatekeeping positions in publishing companies and TV companies. So they really have the kind of commanding voice in our culture very often. But they're a tiny minority of who we are.
But it really does behave like a religion in a lot of ways. It really does. And, Mark Andreessen broke it down very eloquently, where he's explaining that it has all of the things that a cult has. It has the indoctrination, it has the excommunication, where you're shamed, kicked out of the group, the disconnect from the group members. It's got all those things to it. And that's like a big part of it is like worried about being shamed and cast out of the group, which is terrifying for people. So they're willing to say and believe things that aren't that logical, if they can stay in the group.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's natural.
We believe what we have to believe in order to earn status in our groups, and that's true for these people as it is true for anyone else. And and I agree with the cult thing, but I would just add that all human groups have cult elements. They have special languages, they have rules, hierarchies, rewards and punishments. It's just that cults are the tightest possible form of human group.
I learned that when I started doing martial arts, because one of the things that was really interesting.
Man, very interesting conversation, very interesting points that he was bringing up. But what's really funny about this guy, this Will guy, is he doesn't really want to lean into what Joe was putting down in terms of woke and like how it's so likened to communism and likened to cults. You notice he was doing that whole thing of like, everybody has these cult-like aspects, every community, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, man, you can really look at what's going on in the woke world and link that not just to a cult, because the cult thing is obvious when you see what's going on. But when he started talking about communism and flipping the hierarchy, that really stood out to me, because most of these social justice organizations, they don't seem like they're working. First of all, they don't even seem like they're working for the people they say they're working for. Let's go on to these other clips that I have here. But they don't even seem, and point in case, let's just go right to this clip right away. Leader of the Black Lives Matter. Here, let's just play this real quick.
The criticism is helpful. I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
Yeah, of course. Of course they are. They're trained Marxists. That was something that came up right away, and a lot of people shooed it away, and some people didn't even know what it was. But they're trained Marxists. Now, it goes back to what I was just saying, how it doesn't even seem like they're working in the best interests of the groups they represent. You know, case in point, BLM. When you looked at what was really happening in the name of BLM, in the name of black people, black communities were being destroyed. In the name of black people, you know, there were some black people who were injured, going to jail, all sorts of stuff. It was crazy. It was horrible. And then at the end of it, after they collected all the money, you're like, oh, well, I guess they're just going to rebuild cities and build community centers and all this stuff. And they didn't do any of that. They bought mansions. And they actually participated in nepotism, which is such a privileged thing to get to do. You know, you hire your brother and you make him security. I think that's what one of them did. A brother or cousin, hire him as security and pay him $1 million a year. And it's like, and then another example would be feminism. You know, this, I believe it's the third wave of feminism. It doesn't even seem like it's working in favor of women. And, you know, arguably the whole thing wasn't in favor of women because, you know, it's gone to this cult-like extent where someone like my wife, you know, we've just had a child. So if you're wondering why she's not here, she's actually taking care of the baby. She actually wants to be a stay-at-home mom. That's what she wants. She wants me to be providing. She wants me to work hard, and she wants to take care of the family, and that's what she wants. And that's what she's doing right now. And a lot of women, because she was a career corporate type of woman, would look at that and be like, oh, they would shame her for wanting to do that. You know, just like the black community would shame me just for even speaking this way. Not even just the content of what I'm saying, but the way my voice sounds, the way I might sound like a white person to some people. They would shame me for that. It's just, I don't know. But let's just get into the other clips as we go on. Oh, and then the status. Oh, real quick, because I got points here. Because this topic really kind of infuriates me because a lot of people really need to understand this. The status, when he was talking about status and how, I'm saying it like him, when he was talking about status, you know, there is a status to being woke, right? There's a status in the whole communism regime. You wanted everything to get flipped, and then you wanted to be the people at the top. And the same goes for the woke movement. You want the status of being somebody who's vulnerable. You want the status of being somebody who's a victim. You want the status of being woke. You want the status of being black or a person of color. You want the status of being LGBTQ. You want that status. You need it in order to be in a higher place in the hierarchy. You know, it's like, I'm black, I have blue hair, I identify as XYZ, and also I am, non-binary, you know, whatever it is, you know, just whatever bingo card they have filled out. But let's move on to clips. Brett Weinstein and what he went through, the severe amount of racism he went through that shocked Tucker Carlson. Let's listen to that.
Time now for campus craziness, and tonight the title is not an overstatement, it really is crazy. Consider Evergreen State College in Washington and Olympia. Every year the school holds a day in absence. In years past, non-white students symbolically left campus and attended anti-racism events. This year, student activists demanded that all white people leave campus or else. Brett Weinstein refused. He's a professor at Evergreen State, and he called the race-based demand, quote, a show of force and an act of oppression. In response to that, here's what happened.
This is not about you.
I'm talking about this is all about him.
On terms of white privilege. This is not a discussion. You have lost that one.
You said some racist.
Can you apologize?
I did not.
Okay. Stop telling people of color the useless. You're useless. Get the out.
History could pivot in the direction of the values that you are standing here for.
Yeah, resign.
What?
Resign.
I'm not resigning.
Go out. Yeah,
Wow. Professor Brett Weinstein joins us now. Professor, first of all, thank you for coming on. That looks like something, you know, out of Phnom Penh, 1975. Was that, I mean, what exactly was going on there? What happened?
Well, what happened is that 50 or so students decided to disrupt the class that I was holding that morning and demand my resignation.
Because you wouldn't leave campus because you're white?
Well, they imagine that I am a racist and that I am teaching racism in the classroom, and that has caused them to imagine that I have no right to speak, that I am harming students by the very act of teaching them.
What happened after the video cut out?
Well, that's an interesting story. The campus police apparently showed up outside of the classroom. The protesters then blocked their entrance. I did not call the police. Someone else called the police, and they were concerned for my safety. But when they tried to come into the building to make sure that I was okay, the protesters blocked them. And because the issue of policing is so sensitive at the moment, the police had to run around and find another entrance to the building to get inside and check with me. At the point they did that, the protesters moved on and corralled the president of the college at his office. They extracted some demands from him. Among the demands was that there would be a meeting, well, actually, demands is perhaps the wrong word, a concession, that there would be a meeting at 4 o'clock in a large room on top of our library building. That meeting took place at the end of the day, and believe it or not, it was far crazier than the video that you just showed.
This whole story is so over the top that even though we do a lot of these, it's hard for me to believe it's real. So the core demand is that all people of your skin color leave the campus. Your president is a guy called George Bridges. Where was he?
Bridges.
Why isn't, there he is right there. Why, George Bridges is supposed to be running this school. Why is he allowing a mob to threaten one of his professors?
Well, I must say, I have some concern that the story is so strange that it's not even going to make sense to an audience that isn't local to the campus. Dr. Bridges is allowing this mob to effectively control the campus, and they have been in control since 9:30 on Tuesday morning. At this moment, I believe Dr. Bridges is answering a set of demands put forward by the protesters, and they have said that if he does not accept their demands, that there will be violence. I do not know what his response to those demands is going to be, but I know that that's taking place at this hour. He has also told the police to stand down. So although the campus police have a sense of what it is that needs to happen in a circumstance like this, they have been hobbled by the fact that they answer to the college administration, and in fact for several days have been barricaded in the campus police station.
Oh my gosh, this is...
Tucker's like, what are you talking about? But this happened years ago. And this is where social justice, this is where they used to retreat to. They used to retreat to the black community, and it was just black versus white, people of color and people who are white. White people are all powerful and need to get put in check, and the rest of us are oppressed, and we need to be able to flourish without your white presence. That's where these, and again, I'm just going to use the term because for lack of a better, that's where these Marxist, communist type of people went into. Because if you just go to the structure, if you just go to the hierarchy and say, I want to flip everything, I don't care, I'm tired of this and I want to flip everything. Well, people are going to be like, well, you're a militia. You're a militia. You just want to flip everything over. You just want to take power. You're just trying to disrupt things. But if you disguise yourself into the black community and you get these social justice organizations all riled up and you say, hey, you know, that professor needs to go, that school needs to learn, put these white guys in their place. That's how you do it instead, right? You have to penetrate a certain thing. And that's why it's moved from the black community into the woke community, which has access to the gay community, queer, trans, the IA, the S, whatever that stands for, the plus. They have access to all these communities now, and they just kind of weed their philosophies into that. That's why when I played that clip of that woman who's in BLM saying we're trained Marxists, because she knew, she weaseled that Marxist type of thinking, ideology. She said we are well-versed in ideology. She knew to weasel that in to the black community, which is why they didn't do anything to help the black community, which is why when you look at the LGBTQ movement right now, they're not doing anything to help those communities really, because they're not after helping people. They're after flipping the hierarchy. They're after, and again, exactly like Will was saying, not flipping it so those in power get what they deserve, flipping it so they can be in power. That's what's going on. Now, let's move on to just a quick clip of, they're talking about that president. They're talking about George Bridges and the meeting that he was going to have, just so you can see really quick. This is what the meeting was like for this guy. Poor guy.
And you're still here. Look, you called for a man who was being harassed or threatened. Why the fuck is he here? Please. Explain.
And what gets me is there was Shamir could just blatantly ask you what you could do to protect students, and you were ready. No, you sat here and you disregarded that all of us came here and took a risk to come here and be in this room with the way everybody's acting on campus, but you were ready to adjourn it for one white professor. Right?
What's your action?
Did you stop?
Put your head down.
Watch yourself. That's not appropriate.
Ho ho! These racist teachers have got to go. Hey hey! Ho ho! These racist teachers have got to go. Hey hey! Teachers have got to go. Hey hey! Ho ho! These racist teachers have got to go. Hey hey! Ho ho! These racist teachers have got to go. Black power! Black power! Black power! Black power! Black power!
There is a man named...
So, just to show you, that's what that gentleman, the dean, I guess, president of the school, that's what he was going through for like hours. It got to the point where if he pointed, they'd be like, that's a microaggression. If he did something with his face, they'd be like, that's a microaggression. They started yelling, put your head down. And he actually ended up putting his head down. He was just at the mercy of these students for so long. It was a wild thing to see. And it was an openly racist thing they were doing. They were actually after segregation. Imagine if the roles were reversed. And I know that's always the easiest thing to say, but it makes it so much easier to picture. Imagine if the roles were reversed and it was a bunch of white people and they were demanding that this one black teacher leave and doxing the students who decided to go to his class as he stood in defiance. You'd be like, this is crazy. You'd be like, these are Klansmen. What is going on? But they rationed it out that this is okay because these are people of color. And it's not just because these kids were all riled up against racism. It's because the social justice organizations, these social justice organizers, are infused with Marxism. And this is how they take power. They do it in the schools. They do it in businesses. They do it in media. And they're going to continue to do it. And it's not, and again, they're not trying to help anybody. They are trying to gain power. And here's the thing. It went from the black community and moved on to the LGBT community. And it's not because the black community all of a sudden wasn't oppressed anymore. It's because, and that's the reason why this article is actually real and does actually exist. Straight black men are the white people of black people. The reason that they're saying that is because how many men do you know right now, black men, who are standing up for Trump, who are saying, you know what, I'm going to be Republican, who are saying, you know what, I'm going to move towards God, who are saying, you know what, I want to have a nuclear family and I want a submissive wife who wants to be at home with my kids, are saying, you know what, I'm actually not oppressed. How many have come out of the woodwork in the past 10 years? There are so many. Guys are making rap songs about Trump, right? And you have those type of black men. Then you have black men who are just like clean cut, like Larry Elder, clean cut, wearing suits. And they're like, who's oppressing me? Nobody. And they're actually going out in the world and achieving. It's because they're standing up to the current narrative. That's why they're getting branded as white men. That's why they're getting called the white people of black people, because they're not giving into the narrative. So once you don't get into the narrative and they're talking about that cult aspect, remember Joe and them were talking about that cult aspect of things. Well, if all these black men seem to be, they were the poster child of oppression. They're the poster child. And now all of a sudden, they're deciding to do something else. They're deciding to say something that's completely against the narrative. What happens in the cult? You get excommunicated. But you don't just get excommunicated. They don't just leave you alone. They make sure to attack you, to show everybody else in the cult, this is what happens when you leave, and make it as hard for you as possible. So, just to show you again, this was actually a movement of things. It wasn't just that one article that Joe found. This was like a movement of things. They kept saying this. This is from 2018. They started, and when did a lot of black men start rising up and start questioning things? 2018, 2020 came around. What was also changing around 2018? Trump was in office. There were people realizing, guy's not actually that bad. A lot of people. There was a big uptick in black people that were turning Republican in those years. So obviously you have to attack before those black men who are supposed to be the poster childs for oppression could actually infiltrate the woke mindset and say, hey guys, it's actually not that bad. So there was a whole stream of these articles calling black men white people. I love it, man. I love it. We live in the Twilight Zone. It's so fun. And then we got articles about Larry Elder, and I'm going to move on to a clip about him in a second, but I just wanted to show you the article that they're actually talking about, made by the LA Times. As you can see here, Larry Elder is the black face of white supremacy. This in and of itself, just years ago, before they even made this article, this would be considered a somewhat offensive thing to say. You're calling a black man who has decided to be Republican, who has decided to go against the grain, you're calling him the black face of white supremacy. That's a very insulting thing to say, but that's the thing. They want it to be insulting. A man that's going against the narrative needs to be attacked by the cult. He's in California, for God's sakes, So let's listen to a clip of him actually talking with Sean Hannity.
This disgusting headline from the LA Times: Larry Elder is the black face of white supremacy. You've been warned. The LA Times printed that. Here to react, he's leading in the polls in terms of who would replace Gavin Newsom if question 1 is recalled. I see you smiling. We've been friends a long time. I am sorry. I am genuinely friend to friend sorry that you have to go through something as evil and horrific and racist as that.
Well, Sean, thank you for that, but I anticipated that would happen. This is why a lot of people don't go into politics, because of the politics of personal destruction. And this is not the first time the LA Times has attacked me. There's another writer who all but called me a black David Duke. And I've been a politician now for a little more than a month. And at first, as you know, they tried to keep me off the ballot by claiming I didn't properly turn over 5 years of taxes. We ended up suing. And a left-wing judge said that Elder was right and threw that out and put me right back on the ballot. And then I was accused of hating women because I wrote an article 21 years ago where I cited a study from the left-wing Annenberg School of Journalism that looked at 25 questions asked of men and women, and men knew more about those questions than did women. And I quoted a left-wing professor who said the reason women knew less is because they get their primary source from local news, quote, and she said watching local news makes you dumber, close quote. I didn't say that, she did. Then I was accused of brandishing a firearm at a former girlfriend. I want to say right now, I've never brandished a firearm, loaded or unloaded, at anybody. As for the rest of the allegations she made, I'm not going to dignify them by giving them a comment. And now we have this article from the LA Times. You're right, Sean. They are scared to death. They know that if California can elect a conservative governor like myself, and they can and they will on September the 14th, then any state can. And they're deathly afraid of this. I'm told that Senator Dianne Feinstein is more feeble than Joe Biden. And if she retires or becomes incapacitated, they're afraid that I will appoint a Republican governor, and that would shift the whole balance in the Senate. So for all
Wow, that kind of makes sense now that we know what happened with Feinstein, how long they worked her pretty much until her dying day. Kind of makes sense now because they wanted to keep a guy like this out. But again, gentlemen's going against the grain, going against what the current narrative is of of black men. He's somebody who avidly talks about not being oppressed. He's someone who actively talks about racism not being something that we all need to focus on, race being something that we do not need to focus on, and he gets attacked for it. We'll move on to Herschel Walker. He had this to say, and then I'll show you what was said about him afterwards.
Business suit on It's a Small World ride. That was something to see. It just shows you what a caring, loving father he is. It hurt my soul to hear the terrible names that people call Donald. The worst one is racist. I take it as a personal insult that people would think I've had a 37-year friendship with a racist. People who think that don't know what they're talking about. Growing up in the Deep South, I've seen racism up close. I know what it is, and it isn't Donald Trump. Just because someone loves and respects the flag, our national anthem, and our country, doesn't mean they don't care about social justice. I care about all those things. So does Donald Trump. He shows how much he cares about social justice in the black community through his actions. And his action speaks louder than stickers or slogans on a jersey. He keeps right on fighting to improve the lives of black Americans and all Americans. He works night and day. He never stops. He leaves nothing on the field. Some people don't like his style, the way he knocks down obstacles that get in the way of his goals. People on the opposing team didn't like when I ran over them either. But that's how you get the job done.
So that was Herschel. He's talking about Donald Trump. Obviously, he's had a long relationship with the man. And right away, they made sure to attack this guy. Right away. Let me see. Where's that clip? Oh, there it is. Yeah. Right away. White supremacy and blackface. The curious case of Herschel Walker as he's sitting there, greeting Trump. Like, it's just crazy. But what do Larry Elder and Herschel Walker have in common? They're somebody who are they're going against what what the woke mob has framed a black man as. They want a black person to feel like they're oppressed by a white person. It causes divide. They want that. So when all of a sudden there's two guys like this and they're talking about racism not being that prevalent and they're not feeling it and they're in suits and they're from the deep, one of them's from the Deep South, knows real racism, all of a sudden they're just like, no. This has to stop immediately. So we have to brand them as a certain thing. They really do have the same markings as a lot of communist regimes, man. A lot of the same markings. Just the fact that one thing that they brought up, I will say, in this episode, we're going to move on to the Jordan Peterson clip. It's a long one. Private property. That the communists wanting to take private property away is the exact same as the woke mob wanting to take privilege away. Well, we have to take the private property away because you have so much other people don't have. We're going to make this stuff equal. Then all of a sudden you move on to racist, racial privilege, white privilege. Well, we have to take your privilege away because there's so many people who don't have any privilege. So we're going to take yours away and we're going to distribute it equally. We're going to have some equality here. But what actually ends up happening? And we can see it right now. There are people who have no problem being openly racist towards white people. They have no problem. And this is not, it works on some leftist type guys who kind of put their head in shame and they go, yeah, we're pretty bad. But it emboldens a lot of white guys. A lot of white guys are like, oh, okay. Are we doing, you want to go back and forth? Because I can do that. I feel emboldened now. Now I want to say some things that are offensive because you have no problem offending me and I should have a problem offending you. It causes more divide. It's very, very interesting what they're doing. And then the white race, former people, that term of former people, that's exactly what's happening to white people right now. They're getting knocked down in our hierarchy, even though they had nothing to do with all the oppression that came about with slavery and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, well, your ancestors suck. Your ancestors suck, and because of that, you suck. And you should do something to help other people. And it's like, I couldn't imagine if someone said that to me. I couldn't imagine if that was like just the mental framework so many people were working with. They're like, hey, your African ancestors, they suck. And because of that, you should be doing something to help random people you have no issue with and you've never met before. And you're benefiting. In society, you're just completely benefiting all the time. Which, for me, as a black person who sounds white, and you could make a case that I'm one of those straight black men who are the white people of black people. It's me. I'm privileged. I'm wearing a Mona Lisa shirt. I got a white wife downstairs taking care of my kids. It's me. I'm privileged. I'm the new straight white male. I'm basking in it. Basking in the privilege here. Let's move on to Jordan Peterson, where he's talking about not letting the woke mob form and participating in the lie. Very powerful stuff. Let's go.
So I watched my colleagues take micro-retreat.
That is way too fast. I do that all the time. I apologize. Let me go back to normal speed for everybody. Here you go.
5,000 times. And then by the end of that, they were in a situation where they had to ask a question like, well, what do we do to not be canceled by the woke mob? And the answer was, don't let the woke mob form. Well, it has formed. It's like, yeah, it has. It's a little late now. Now you're paying the price for all that avoidance, which we just talked about in the first part of this discussion. And so, you know when you quell what you have to say, right? And you experience an inner disquiet, you think, I have something to say, but I'm afraid to say it. It's like, fair enough. How afraid are you not to say it? People have complimented me on my bravery, which is something I'm not particularly comfortable with, because I don't think it's the right way of thinking about it. It's not how I think about it. I think, no, I'm just afraid of the right thing. It's not that I'm brave. I'm way more afraid of not saying what I have to say than I am of saying it. And the consequences of saying what I have had to say have been dramatic and sometimes very painful, and also extremely rewarding, both of those at the same time. But I know perfectly well what the consequence of not saying what you have to say is, because I studied totalitarianism for 40 years. And in a totalitarian state, no one ever says what they have to say. You know, we have this theory about totalitarianism. It's sort of the theory we have about Putin right now. It's like there's a lot of innocent Russians, and there's Putin. He's the tyrant, and all these innocent Russians are the victims of the tyrant, and that's a totalitarian state. And there's some truth in that, because power structures get extraordinarily warped and punitive in totalitarian states, but it's a completely preposterous model of totalitarianism. The reason that totalitarianism is total is because everyone in a totalitarian state lies about absolutely everything all the time to everyone, to themselves, to their wife or husband, to their children, to the other members of their family, to their friends, to their colleagues. It's the old Russian joke. They pretend to pay us, and we pretend to work. Yeah, ha ha. Ha ha, till everyone starves. Very funny. And you think, well, does everybody really lie all the time in a totalitarian state? And if you ask that question, the first proper response to that is, you wouldn't ask that question if you knew anything at all about what you were talking about, because the evidence is pretty damn clear. In places like East Germany, we went and visited, Tammy and I, when we were in Berlin, we had this very interesting day. We went and visited the museum of the Stasi, that's secret police in East Germany. And the Germans are pretty damn efficient. When they go in for the whole secret police thing, they do it in that hyper-efficient German way. And so we went to this complex of administrative buildings that was quite large and walked through these 1970s offices where the Stasi operated. And it was a huge complex, huge prison-like complex. And it was run by this guy who was a dissident in East Germany when he was 17, who was arrested and put in there for a year, along with his girlfriend, who they tortured in front of him. And now he runs the whole museum, so that was his life. And And this bureaucratic infrastructure, hyper-developed in the Germanic way, was only part of the Stasi network in Eastern Germany. There were huge buildings devoted to the secret police all over Germany. Why? Well, 1/3 of the Eastern Germans were government informers. 1/3. So that means if you had a family of 6 people, 2 of them were informing to the government. And so what did that mean exactly? Well, it meant they listened to everything you said, and then if you ever said anything that would be displeasing to everyone else who was lying 100% of the time, which would really mean anything that was ever true, even remotely, then you could be reported for that, and that wouldn't go very well for you, let's say. But also, if you were the person who did the reporting, well, then you'd get a reward. You know, it was very common in the Soviet Union, where there was a terrible shortage of apartments and people were crammed into these small living areas. Because how much space does someone need, after all, when there's more important things to be concerned with? And one of the most effective ways to get a new apartment would be just to denounce your neighbor down the hall and get them sent off to the gulag, kicking and screaming at 3 o'clock in the morning in front of their family, stripped naked, so they couldn't struggle to, effectively, and then be rewarded by the government granting you an apartment. That's a lovely basis for social organization. And so, totalitarian state is a state that's in the grip of the lie. And so, what that means for each of us is that every time you lie, this is the truth of the matter. Every time you lie, you've just allowed yourself to become possessed by the same tyrannical spirit that's at the core of the totalitarian state. And you might think, no, I'm lying. It's like, no, the spirit of the lie is making itself manifest within you, and you are participating in your own possession. That's what's happening. And so I'm way more afraid of that than I am of the consequences of saying what I have to say.
Man, in the grip of the lie. Every time you lie, you're in the grip of it. And when you look at society today, and I know that was a long clip, and sometimes when people listen to Jordan Peterson, they're like, wow, this guy's like taking it too far when he's talking about woke mobs, but he knows what it all leads to, and he's trying to show us all the time what all of this leads to. This type of thinking, allowing these type of things, allowing campuses to get taken over, it goes to some pretty dark places. So when he says that you're in the grip of the lie, every time you decide to lie, I would also add to that, it's not every time you lie also, it's every time you accept the lie. Every time it's in front of you, every time it's presented, whether it's your daughter's friend or your son's friend or classmates or water cooler, in-laws, every time you are confronted with the lie, and that could be from anything, from what we've gone through in 2020 all the way down to what you see on a regular basis in terms of people's gender and whatnot. Every time you're confronted with these lies and you say nothing, you are in the grip of it as well. And the thing about it is you allow it to flourish. And what I'll say in closing is, I've done videos on this, but when a society is taken by a lie and a totalitarian state is trying to gain power, and everybody's in this state of mass formation, the people who speak up are the ones who shake those who are asleep awake a little bit. And when you don't speak, you allow society to fall deeper and deeper into that sleep. And every time you do speak, even though it might be small, even though it might be to one other person, even though it might be uncomfortable, every time you do it, you shake society awake a little bit more and prevent them from falling deeper and deeper into sleep. Because once they fall too deep into slumber, it gets to the point that Jordan Peterson was just talking about with East Germany. It gets to that point. So it's not just that you don't want to just be in the grip of the lie. You don't want to just hear it and know that it's a lie. You want to actually speak to it. So just bringing that up real quick. Like the episode, it helps tremendously. And other than that, I'm out. Subscribe.
Share.